All right, we're back. We're back for the 2022-2023 season. We figured we'd do a little preview here, get you guys excited. We're around 2 weeks away from the first game. Hopefully, we'll get this out Monday. I think a lot of the fan base is more anticipating this season more than any other season we've had. Last year, we knew we had a great roster. We knew we had a great team going in. But now, after seeing that, the kind of like revolution we've had in culture in basketball this year or the last year, I think people are really anticipating this season. So we want to do a preview. We got Matt on again, of course, but this time we also have Ben Young on and Ryan Norman on. Me and Matt did all the games last year after every single game. It was somewhat exhausting. We thought we'd bring in a couple more friends here. You've heard from Ben Young before on a couple of the post game ones. Ryan lives in Auburn. It's another good friend of mine, and we're glad to have him on. So hopefully we'll have some good four-way discussion here. And I'll let Matt lead the way on what we're going to talk about tonight.
Well, I was just going to say, Ben, do you want to just say anything to the folks? Again, if you don't remember, Ben is the creator of our awesome intro. So he's done a lot for us behind the scenes, and now we get to hear from him a little more. You want to say anything, Ben?
Yeah, I'm just excited to be back. I'm ready to talk a little Auburn basketball. The old F word has been a troublesome spot for for us Auburn faithful. We're ready to get back to a sport where we're reloading and ready to dominate.
Awesome. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, man, I live and breathe our basketball. Jackson and I, we go so far back that we attended a NIT game at Beardy's Memorial Coliseum against the Baylor Bears back in 2008, maybe 2009, actually, either or. So we're ready to get back into it, talk a little hoops. It's buzzing around town a little bit, so let's get it going.
Awesome. I was at that game too. I was a student. I remember it well. That was the highlight of my undergrad career in Auburn basketball. So shout out to everybody who knows what we're talking about. Good for you.
Shout out Rasheem Barrett.
Rasheem Barrett. So let's give a little detail on where we are going into the season. I think Auburn's getting a lot of respect. They were picked number 4 in the SEC by the media recently. They were put at number 17 nationally by John Rothstein, our guy, shout out. Number 15 in the AP poll. That, to me, with some of the question marks on this team, is the first year in a while where I feel like Auburn's getting a good bit of respect, and kind of the Bruce Pearl effect and how good of a coach he is kind of being appreciated. I just kind of wanted to go around. Jackson, what are your thoughts on like where we are being ranked and kind of the expectations game this year?
I always feel like there's a brand issue with Bruce that I think his coaching and development so well, like has done so well that you should always give him the benefit of the doubt about 5 or 6 spots in the AP poll above where you think they should be, maybe talent wise or recruiting wise in the beginning. And he does that every year. Basically, he's been underrated every year in the AP poll and moved up every year. And so it's irritating to see sometimes some of the more blue blood guys and bigger name coaches kind of get that benefit of the doubt when they have a big roster turnover. And you're right, this was like the first year. They're like, you know what? He had a decent to really good, for us personally, one of the best ever recruiting classes. Benefit of the doubt, he's going to be there somewhere in the middle. They're probably going to lose a couple that maybe they shouldn't or whatever. They're going to win a couple they should, and he's going to coach them really well. And it's just nice to see we're finally getting some of that respect.
Ben, Ryan, any thoughts on preseason polls and kind of where the team is picked and expectations related to maybe what your expectations are for this year going into it?
Yeah, I think
So,
go ahead, Ben.
oh no, you got it, man. Go for it.
So I think 4th is fair. I think given where we finished last year, the 2 major pieces that we lost in Kessler and Jabari, where you also have a team such as Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas kind of reloading and getting those top classes and even bringing more guys back. I think 4th is fair. And look, Bruce interviewed a few weeks ago, or when this poll came out and these rankings came out, and he said, I think that's even still high for us. And he always does that every year. He tries to lower our expectations, even though we may have a really good team coming in. We're still a little unproven. I think 4th is very fair. And I honestly would be thrilled finishing 4th in the conference this year, considering what we're going against.
Yeah, last year we definitely found out how deep the SEC is. If I'm remembering my stats correctly, we sent 6 teams to the dance. So top 4 means you're in the NCAA tournament, and it was not that long ago that was not an expectation for Auburn. So the idea that we're debating whether or not this team is being treated with respect, given how recently we weren't even considered for the NCAA tournament, shows just how far this program has already come, and we should all be feeling really excited and really good about that.
We've got Kentucky, Arkansas, and Tennessee all above us in the AP poll. Kentucky's got Oscar Tshiebwe coming back along with their usual amazing recruiting classes at number 4. Arkansas's number 10. They had a huge recruiting class. For some reason, they can offer every single player in America a scholarship. I don't know how it works, but people are really excited for that guy there. And they made people were talking about potential national championship kind of stuff under Arkansas this year. But I think they've gotten a little ahead of themselves, and now the AP poll has brought them back just a bit to top 10, and Tennessee at 11. You know my takes on Tennessee. I get so irritated. They get the benefit of the doubt every single season. They haven't done jack anything since Rick Barnes been there really in the postseason. I think they finally won the SEC tournament this last year, so they finally broke that like curse of not really doing anything the entire time. I know they won that SEC title or whatever technically when we won it too, even though we had the win over them at home. I don't count it, so it doesn't count to me. But there's still another year for them, another hype to start the season. And they're going to recruit off of that. They're going to NIL off of that. And it irritates the mess out of me. We'll see if they finally prove me wrong this year and actually finish like higher than they have on the AP poll. We'll see.
That's the interesting narrative this year, right? Is last year, almost the whole SEC kind of was terrible in the tournament. So we're all kind of in this boat where Auburn really didn't play their best ball at the end. Kentucky obviously lost to St. Peter's. Tennessee went down in kind of a blaze of glory, and that narrative around Rick Barnes and Tennessee in the postseason is a thing people are talking about. Arkansas has been the consistent tournament team the last 2 years, but their regular seasons, they've been good, but they haven't necessarily won much off of it. So I do think it's fascinating. The SEC is so much better than it used to be. Ryan, you were talking about the game you went to back then. I mean, the SEC was just so bad across the board outside of 2 or 3 schools. That's one of the storylines for me this year is how strong is the league in non-conference play, in the Big 12 SEC Challenge, and then ultimately in the tournament. Is it as strong as maybe, have we gone too far in thinking that the SEC is this like awesome basketball conference, which I think it's the best it's ever been, but that's something I'm going to be watching this year. Ryan, go ahead.
So just kind of thinking about what happened in the offseason with teams such as like LSU, South Carolina losing their coach, Mississippi State, Georgia. I do think this year, for maybe one of the first times, we are going to see a little bit of drop off after 6. I think maybe 6, 7, you'll see a drop off just with the amount of talent that maybe left the SEC this year, some coaching moves, coaching changes, maybe teams trying to figure it out. But maybe the next year, it'll be back to that full strength, full power. I think Vanderbilt's a little interesting this year with Stackhouse coming back again with some 5-stars in there. But LSU losing Will Wade and just the whole roster basically leaving the whole school. I think them being an 8's a little generous, but we'll see. I think that's going to be an interesting part of this year is can we even get 6 back in the tournament? You mentioned out of conference play, the Big 12 SEC Challenge. How we fare against that. That's very interesting points there you make about how's it going to fare up this year and what kind of challenge we're going to do with that and even the postseason.
So my question before we get into out of conference a little bit and kind of looking at the schedule, I think it's always good to ask what defines a successful season this year. For so long it was like, can Auburn just get in the tournament? I know for me personally, for half my life, that was the goal. And we finally have done that, pretty regularly now. And I think people think this Auburn team should be a tournament team. That's fair to say. But there was a big kind of debate on some people on Twitter that are kind of just assuming that this team could be a team that goes like 14-4 in the league and competes for the championship. And I just don't know personally if I see that yet until we see some questions answered on the court. So whether you want to go SEC record or kind of like, for instance, being picked 4th in the SEC, that would mean if Auburn got 4th, that's a double bye in the SEC tournament, which is always nice. And that means you're going to be a good seed. If you have that good of a year, you're going to be good. Like, what would look like a good season to you this year? And I want everybody to kind of give their take on that. Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, last year we had this amazing. We've kind of had 2 different amazing seasons. We had the Final Four run, which was a team that had to figure it out through the season and got hot at just the right time to go into the tournament and go to the Final Four. Amazing. That's one way you can do it. And, you don't get as many in-season awards or hype during the season, but you get this amazing run at the end. Then you've had the reverse kind of in this last year, a team that was hyped up the entire time, amazing to watch all season long, #1 ranking, but we peaked too soon, it really feels like, and we kind of like stuttered down the end. We didn't want to make our corrections. We were too like up there already. We were #1. Why would we adjust anything? You know, even though we could kind of see it coming a mile away that we were starting to have issues and people had started figuring us out. So then you kind of like, you've had those two sides or whatever. This year, I'd love to go back a bit to like peaking at the right time. I know that's a little cliche. People say it all the time, but this team, the roster turnover, I would love to see us do two things: stay in the top 25 all year, even though I think we were going to have times where I'd rather us experiment and make sure we've got it right by the end, even if that costs us a game or two here and there. I don't think we're hunting for rings in the same way. Now, if we catch fire and go undefeated in a conference, even against some decent teams like USC and Washington, and we win our first 2 or 3 or 4 games in the SEC, okay, then we maybe adjust, like, no, we are going to like keep the motor running at 100 out of 100. That's what happened last time. So we kind of burnt out at some point. But you can do that if you think you're really chasing for rings. This time, I think we're going to have a little more issues with 3-point shooting and younger players on the team and things. I'd rather us be tinkering the entire time and take a loss maybe here and there that maybe you wouldn't have had if you hadn't adjusted the roster here and there to figure out what you want by the end. So that's what I'm hoping for, those two things. Stay in the top 25, which means even when you're losing your clunkers, people still respect you because we're still playing at a higher level, even while we're tinkering. Because you can go the other way. We can tinker so hard that we're falling out, and it's really kind of a struggle. I mean, that Final Four team was kind of like that. It took us a while to really figure it out. We had some embarrassing losses during that time while we were trying to figure it out. So I don't want that. I don't want to be that embarrassing, but I want us to be tinkering and figure it out at the end. So that's my success. Be figuring it out all during the year and stay in the top 25.
Who's next?
All right. So if you exclude the COVID year, which obviously was crazy, we put ourselves on probation. There was a lot going on that influenced the way that a lot of teams worked out. But if you look at 2019, 2020, and then 2022, 2021, 2022, Auburn is 32-1 at home in those 2 years that have kind of come to define the modern perception of Bruce Pearl teams at Auburn. And both of those teams struggled in different ways, particularly on the road, but they were able to defend home court. So that, for me, is what a successful season looks like. If you're winning 15, 16 games at home, if you only lose 1 or 2 games at home, especially against quality opponents, that says a lot about the character of your basketball team. It says a lot about the character of your program, and that you're continuing to do that stuff where you're heading in the right direction. So college basketball can be wild. Our Final Four team lost by what? Was it 20, 27, 30 points on the road to Kentucky before we wound up going through them on our way to the Final Four? So college basketball and college sports in general, winning on the road is one of the toughest things. So if you put together a team that can protect home court, you're going to win a lot of games, and you're also going to set yourself up for success down the road.
Yeah, I would say I like Jackson's point of top 25. I mean, there's just something that resonates with having a number next to your name throughout the whole year. I think that's key. I agree with Ben's point too. Winning at home, people here pride themselves in this home court advantage we've created. The students have bought into it. You now have to have an over $200,000 donation just to have season tickets if you want to try to get on the wait list. I mean, it's absurd. And I think keeping that track at home throughout the year is just not only vital for this year, but just even moving forward, recruiting, it creates an advantage for us. So winning at home, yes. I would say too, I think just making a tournament is always a goal that we should have every single year, because it's so hard to do. And when you don't make it for 1 year, you can see how quickly it could spiral out of control, and that you don't make it again. South Carolina's a great example. They made it to the Final Four and then nothing. They were out of it completely. So I think making that, I think having over a 10-win SEC season is attainable, and it's something that we can do. And it's something I expect from just seeing what we have on the roster, what we bring back, and how we compare against everyone else. So I agree with top 25, winning at home, having over an 85% win percentage at home, and then having over a 10-win SEC season, I think is all attainable.
Awesome. Jackson, go ahead.
Can I add one more thing in?
Yep.
Some of this is a little more ethereal, a little more like feeling. Making sure we keep our rivals down a bit. We play Arkansas at home. I think it's the only time we play Arkansas is one game at home. Got like anytime these guys are kind of like, I always think of us as the new bloods. We're kind of competing. I think it's always been this way in the SEC a little bit. It's Kentucky. Everybody knows Kentucky. They're always going to be Kentucky no matter what happens. It goes up and down. But there's always seems to be like a second team of Florida or, Arkansas in the 90s or different teams kind of come up to be that second team that goes back and forth. Tennessee under Bruce Pearl is a little bit like that. And they keep that like new blood brand. And Tennessee was our team we were trying to compete against with for a little bit there. And I think like we've won more than them, but they've kept this annoying brand up a bit with their hype. Now Arkansas thinks they're that team, that they're going to be they're that second team that's going to compete or whatever. Alabama briefly thought they were going to be that, and we can get into that later with some of the stuff that's going on with them. But I just want to make sure we stay in that conversation as the new blood. If Arkansas wins the SEC this year or Tennessee wins the SEC this year, it's going to, like, even though we did it last year, it's going to be this back and forth. If we can keep them out of winning it, if Kentucky wins it, that sucks. But me and Matt did this last year. What teams do we least want to win the SEC and most want to win the SEC? And I think, Kentucky wins something, it's kind of status for a lot of people in the brand. If we beat them, it's an upset. But if Tennessee or Arkansas, like Arkansas comes in and beats us at home, it's going to really hurt. And so then you're like, okay, but you're top 25 and getting better every game stays. But sometimes it's that feeling, if you let Arkansas embarrass us at home, even if we do something later, it changes the brand. So that's just another, like, let's just make sure we don't get swept by one of these rivals or do something embarrassing with Alabama or something. So,
and let's just go pick one off in Lexington while we're at it. I mean, it's been forever. Let's just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
You could make up for some other rival losses if we could break that curse. That would be real nice.
It's going to be tough, but we'll get into this at some other points. But if there's a team that can match up down low with Kentucky this year, I think it's us. Anyways.
And if I can put one last bit of perspective into, as a kind of a period on our perspective, talking about what does it mean for Auburn to have a good season? How many people on this call know how many times Auburn has made the NCAA tournament? We've been playing basketball since 1906.
Are we doing trivia? I'm
11
gonna say
times.
11. Oh, I thought we were going to go around. I was going to say 9. So that's good. I'm glad we didn't do trivia then.
Oh, no. Okay. All right. Well, we'll do trivia. We'll do a little bit more trivia. How many times have we made the round of 32 in the 11 times that we've made it?
11. No, it depends on the tournament. The tournament changed sizes, but we've won every first round game, right? We've never lost round of 64.
Matt sounded so
Correct.
confident.
Well,
I'm with him.
What year did the tournament setup change?
I don't know.
Do you know?
Isn't that a thing?
Because it has us. I was not prepared to Google, so I don't know. But it has us listed here. In '84, we made the tournament, but we did not advance to the round of 32.
Yeah,
so we've advanced to the round of 32 10 times.
I like this.
Charleston had lost in that first round.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I like this. Let's do trivia more. If Ben or Ryan or somebody else wants to come up with a trivia question every time, I'd love it.
Can we be sponsored?
Jax, I love my stats.
We're open to sponsorships, Aflac, if you want to do our trivia question. My thoughts on this season are just, I want us to defend the SEC title well. It's kind of an NBA thing a little bit, but, Auburn won the SEC outright last year, and that is not, again, you want to go trivia. How many times has Auburn done that? Not many. So I think.
Do you want that answer?
What is it? 3, 2? Outright. 5.
5 times we've won it outright as regular season champions.
Need to go back in my life. Hasn't happened very much. So
Fair.
I think just kind of like Jackson said, I think looking like we belong in that, even if it's not necessarily a banner year for us, just defending the title and chasing it. I do think we're at the point where we should be chasing stuff every year. I agree with Ryan. Getting in the tournament is first and foremost. Jackson and I, when we talked years ago, one of the most incredible things is if you look at the list of teams that make the tournament 4 straight years, it is very small. And Auburn was on track to do that until the 2020 thing that Ben talked about. So we got last year. Can you build a kind of that consistency? I think making the tournament's number 1, chasing the titles is number 2, and being in the top half and competing and continuing to solidify the program. So I kind of agree with a little bit of everything that y'all said. So that's kind of a brief overview. we're going to jump into kind of an out of conference and then a conference look just at the schedule. Ben's got some stuff prepared that we're going to talk through. Some of the opponents we're going to play at kind of a 30,000 foot view, and then I'm going to do some nerdy stuff about the SEC schedule, who we play twice, who we play on the road, all that stuff, and then we'll get to the roster and the players kind of to wrap it up. So Ben, take it away, out of conference preview.
All right, yeah, so we've got some interesting matchups this year. Obviously, we have St. Louis coming to Auburn as part of our home and home series with them. They gave us a good bit of a challenge early in the year last year. They were kind of a bellwether game for us. I feel like a lot of the roster sort of found themselves, particularly guys like Katie Johnson. And we also have, I believe, Memphis at home as well, right? Yeah, Memphis used to be a little bit more of a top-tier program than they are now, but they are still going to be another one of those strong mid-major contenders. They're a team that's made the tournament before. But we're starting off with one of our most interesting matchups. We're going against George Mason. They were the Cinderella of 2006, for anybody that remembers that immaculate year in the tournament, where they ran through to the Final Four. And they had a run that was very similar to Auburn, where they had to go through several blue bloods. They started off with Michigan State, won that game, went through North Carolina. Wichita State has become a little bit more of a household name since then, but at the time, they were still usually at the top of their conference in the Ohio Valley, usually a tournament team, so still a good team to beat. And then they beat number 1 seed UConn to make the Final Four. And that team was coached, I'm probably going to pronounce this incorrectly, Jim Larrañaga, right? Oh, it is just Larrañaga. Okay, great. Does anybody know where he coaches now? Ryan, it sounds like you do.
Miami.
That's right. He is the coach of the team that ousted Auburn from the NCAA tournament last year in one of Walker Kessler's roughest games where he could not buy a bucket. But he is no longer at George Mason. However, there are a couple of players at George Mason that we might be familiar with. These are going to be some guys to watch out for. They have a 6'7" guy that rotates kind of between two guard and that small forward position. Devontae Gaines played at Tennessee for a little while, and he also played at George Mason, I believe, last year, averaging 10 points a game, 8 rebounds, and shooting 40% from three at 6'7". So he's a guy that when we go into switch defense, or if we're trying to play man, he has the potential to be a little bit of a matchup nightmare. They also have another guard from Tennessee, Victor Bailey Jr., 6'4" guard. So we've got a little bit taller at guard this year, but I feel like that was one of our biggest struggles down the stretch last year. Is anytime we encountered a team that had taller two guards, a taller point, particularly on the offensive end, they made things really difficult for us. George Mason's an interesting matchup because they have a couple of guys in their roster that are 6'10", but they don't have anybody that they list as a true center. Their coach is trying to play the Nate Oates Alabama style 4 out 1 in, where whoever's your biggest guy on the floor, you essentially set him up as a post man, and you space the floor and rotate the ball looking for cutting lanes. So it's less of a true offense and more of a one-on-one type situation where you're trying to essentially prevent traps and get rid of the help defense. You want to try to get guys into one-on-one matchups, find where you're strongest and dive in. So it'll be interesting to play that in our first game. I think it's really going to test us defensively. But we are 1-0 in our all-time matchups versus George Mason. The final score of the last time we played them was 79-63, not particularly close. I know we're all hoping for something similar in that regard. And then Auburn is doing something interesting this year that we don't normally get into. We're doing a little bit of a West Coast tour. We're going to go out and we're going to play USC in Los Angeles, and then we're going to play the Huskies of Washington out in Seattle. We are 11-6. Oh, no, wait. Yes, we're 11-6 all time on the West Coast. We've played Long Beach State, Pepperdine, Gonzaga, both San Diego and San Jose State, Stanford, Washington, Utah, Weber State. We've played lots of different schools out there, but against Pac-12 competition, we are 6-6 overall, including, I was surprised to learn, a 2-0 all-time record against the University of Arizona. So, Arizona, pretty solid program, has been for a pretty long time, so it was interesting to read that we have such a solid record against them. But USC is up first for us in our West Coast tour. Last year, they finished third overall in the Pac-12. They were 26-8, very solid record, 13-3 at home. So they're definitely going to bring the heat, and they're going to be a challenging team to face. They're returning their starting point guard, Boogie Ellis, 6'3" senior. 12 points per game last year, 38% from three, so he is a score-first point guard. Definitely somebody that I think is going to be a challenge for whoever ends up starting at point for us. They also have a rising junior, Josh Morgan, who plays center for them. 6'11". He's low impact on the stat sheet, but he's that type of wily upperclassman center that really got the better of us down the stretch. Our youth didn't typically show until we were going against big men that were able to effectively position themselves and match up with Kessler in the post size for size. Same thing with Do It All Dylan. Anytime they were facing some of those older guys that have been around college basketball for a while, it gave them trouble. So they're going to be people to watch out for. And then their two guard is rising senior Drew Peterson, 6'9", 12 points per game, 6 rebounds. He shot 47% from the floor and 41% from three. So he's going to be another big challenge defensively. We've got a little bit more height than we did last year, but he's somebody that if he gets hot at home, it could be a little bit of trouble for us. And we will be looking for our first win all time versus the University of Southern California. We are 0-2, averaging a 9-point loss to the Trojans. And then up next, we have Washington, which will be a nice way, I hope, to end the West Coast tour out there. They finished 7th in the Pac-12, 17-15 overall, but they were 11-6 at home. So again, you see even kind of the mediocre college basketball teams, they get most of their wins at home. Going on the road and winning in college basketball is a difficult task, particularly going all the way to the West Coast. PJ Fuller, their returning shooting guard, he's 6'4", so another matchup to keep in mind if we wind up going with Wendell or KD as a starter. They're going to have their hands full defensively, going to be a little bit outsized, but it was something they got a lot of experience with last year. They've also got a power forward, Keon Brooks, 6'7". He averaged 11 points per game last year and shot 59% from the floor playing for Kentucky. So he's a guy that knows how to create space and knows how to get his shots. It's going to involve a lot of patience and a lot of that help defense that we saw last year. It's going to be interesting to see if we have someone that can emerge on this roster the way that Kessler did to be that strong help. That's going to be the difference for us as a team defensively. Do we have guys that are able to rotate in when we play these longer teams and provide that help defense so that the guys up front can continue to stay aggressive? We are 1-0 all time versus the Washington Huskies. Our only matchup was an 88-66 win. And they are among the 4 teams in the Pac-12, including Oregon, Oregon State, and Utah, against whom the Auburn basketball team has never lost. And ladies and gentlemen, that's your out-of-conference preview.
Well done, man. We all just got smarter. If you were like, I know there's so many Auburn fans that are so eager to turn the page a little bit and get to basketball season. That is good stuff. So real quick, SEC thing. If you were early adopter of this podcast, you got our season preview last year. I felt like we were on this. We looked at the schedule. We said we thought Auburn had a better team than people did, and we thought the schedule was very friendly. And that played into some of our predictions for feeling like Auburn could do something last year, which obviously they did. Jackson, go ahead.
Can we talk OOC real quick? Give a little thoughts on that conference schedule as a whole before we get
into
SEC?
Yes, we can.
My big thought on it is that last year we had this amazing big tournament in Atlantis. We talked to Lee Miller that puts that together on the podcast. I think it was the last podcast actually, so check that out. But the Battle Atlantis was great. We learned so much from that UConn OT game. We got the chance to play some great teams. We had Michigan State in that tournament. We didn't get to play them, but we played Syracuse, and you get a lot of benefit, even though Syracuse didn't end up winning the tournament. From like a brand standpoint, beating Syracuse just looked really good. This year's kind of the opposite. Bruce and the team, and Burgo, I believe, is the guy that does the scheduling. Coach Burgomaster. I don't know if we have the rights to call people nicknames at this point yet, but he puts together these schedules, and they do a really good job of like doing the kind of metric that the NCAA tournament looks at. It's a lot of these like at a conference smaller teams, mid-major teams, are the kind of guys that end up helping us a lot in the tournament. I'll get to you in a second, but the tournament this year is not quite as great. It's a weird one. We play like 2 games in Cancun and then 2 more at home, I believe, or 1 more at home, or the other way around. Yeah. You play them at home first, then we play in Cancun. And it's not really any big teams in the tournament that I could think of that are going to be like blue bloods. I would love to get to a point where we get to play at least 1 blue blood a year and out of conference, just as a brand standpoint. But we kind of make up for it with this USC and Washington game. And Ben mentioned that Washington game. That was against the top 25 Washington team at home a couple years back, which was a great win. It was really cool to kind of like jump off. I think it was 2020 season with that team that would have done really well in the tournament if they had not gotten taken out because of COVID. But yeah, it'll be fun to start this year again. I'm really looking for that West Coast team. I think you mentioned the Memphis game. That'll actually be in Atlanta. I believe. And so I'm most looking forward to that West Coast run even more than our tournament.
And
hopefully good.
And don't forget about the trip to Morgantown, West Virginia, in the SEC Big 12.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, that's going to be. Go ahead, Jackson.
And one more before my last finishing thought, because I can't believe I forgot to mention this. Everybody on here knows I'm a Yuri Collins stan. I really wanted us to go out there and recruit Yuri Collins after that game we played against him. He had the most assists, I believe, in the country last year. I'm not if he didn't win that award, it was close. And he turned it up against us at St. Louis. Amazing game. We've had that every year. That's another big point. Basically, every year we've played an away game at a mid-major, and it's been really we haven't been bit yet, but it's actually told us a lot about our team. I think our team came together a lot in that St. Louis game. There was a hilarious video of KD afterwards, like looking for their fans or whatever, and it gets them this like experience away to be like, all right, we can win away, because it gets real tough in the SEC. We've all seen teams that aren't that great we would struggle with, and that kind of gives them that like birth by fire or whatever you would call it to get out there and do that. We don't really have that from a mid-major, but we make up with it with two West Coast teams away at USC and away at Washington. Hopefully we can get at least one of those. I know that sounds crazy. I don't think either of them are ranked this year. I don't think USC is not ranked. You guys can let me know. But if we get one of the two of those, I think that's great, because you've seen how much we struggle away, and it'll be their first. I think it'll be their first away game the entire year will be at USC. So that'll be super interesting.
That'll be the first true away game for sure. And yeah, talking about that trip to Morgantown, it's great because it's going to be one of our longest trips away in the middle of conference play. So that's going to be another chance to put your team into a little bit of adversity, which down the stretch we kind of self-inflicted in our SEC play. So it'll be nice to get out and stretch those bones. West Virginia is not a huge national brand in basketball. I couldn't tell you the last time they made the tournament, unlike last year when we had Oklahoma come to our house. And it was great because Oklahoma's had some great players come out of there recently. They've made the tournament a few times. So it won't be great in terms of like the matchup, but getting to travel like that and take your show on the road, particularly late in the year when hopefully we continue to have a number next to our name, is going to be huge. And I was going to say the same thing for our West Coast trip. You know, even if you come back 1-1 or even 0-2, just the fact that you're going to take your team out there and play, if you can put on a good showing, it's huge for recruiting. We have two guys on our roster from the state of Arizona right now that were some of the top players that we were able to lure away from the West Coast to come and play in the SEC. So the more we continue to reach our brand out there and the more Bruce continues to expand the areas where he can recruit, I think that just does wonders for the program.
I would add that it's great for your tournament metrics too. I think the road games, if you look at how the tiers are broken down and quad one wins and you get a lot more grace and you get more credit if you go on the road and win, because like you said, college basketball is really difficult. So, any other thoughts on out of conference stuff before we kind of?
I mean, I don't know if it says anything about where Auburn is, but defending national champions Kansas goes to West Virginia and plays there January 7th. Cheapest ticket right now is $57. Auburn comes January 28th. Cheapest ticket, $110. I don't know if brand is playing a factor there, but I'm just going by what statistics tell me there. So,
hey, Matt, you going, Matt?
I've thought about it, and that's what's happening. So, I mean, if you're anywhere outside of Auburn, you're there, Ryan. You get to go to all these games, I guess, which is awesome. For everybody else who lives in Huntsville, Atlanta, Birmingham, Nashville, the first thing I did when the schedule came out was like, all right, like where can I go see Auburn play for cheaper than I can going to Auburn? Because Auburn Arena is insane with the demand, like you talked about. So I have no doubt that there's Auburn fans in East Tennessee, North Carolina, up in Virginia who are like, hey, this is my chance to go watch Auburn basketball play.
Is this a good time to shout out the cheap ticket prices for the Alabama and Georgia games? I think we tweeted about it, Matt. Talk about where's the best away games to go to.
There's a ton. So there was stuff on Twitter going around that if you buy 10 tickets from Georgia, that you get them for $10 each. So if you have a group that wants to go to the Auburn, it's January 4th. It's a weeknight, but it's kind of right after New Year's. A great opportunity there. I haven't done a ton of ticket actual looking, but for me in Nashville, if you're in the Nashville area or Huntsville, Tennessee is on a Saturday in Knoxville. Kentucky's on a Saturday in Lexington. West Virginia is on a Saturday in Morgantown. Alabama in Auburn is on a Saturday. So the Saturday games, Vanderbilt, I almost forgot about Vanderbilt, here in Nashville on a Saturday. So find a couple trips, if you're not in Auburn or not able to go to a lot of home games, like that's the way to do it. And unfortunately, the ticket prices, even in those away games, like Ryan mentioned, I think are starting to show that a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun time going to an away game. I've done it a lot. It's so much fun now. So talking about out of conference real quick, I I don't think it's a terrible out of conference schedule. I mean, I know we're used to, like Jackson said, a big tournament here and there, either in Maui, Atlantis, something to really showcase or see where we gauge in terms of where our team is, what are we doing against these national brands. We don't really have that this year besides USC and Washington. Even then, like, I don't expect a hostile environment when we go to USC. I mean, it's December 18th. Like, school's out. It's in LA. I'm not really seeing that. Washington maybe a little bit, but it's not on Washington's campus. It's in Seattle. So that's going to be, it's a neutral site game, I believe. So that will be a little different as well. Alabama did that last year against Gonzaga. I believe it's the same arena. But in terms of like, just, there's some good teams, some good veteran teams. South Florida, we played them last year. We struggled a little bit. We were very slow. I expect us to come out and play really good against them. We don't typically do that in back-to-back teams that we play, where we come out, we're really slow. So I assume we're going to come out there second game of the year, really put pedal to the metal there. Texas Southern is always a team filled with fifth-year seniors. I know we don't really mention them, but they always give teams trouble at the beginning of the year. I mean, they beat Michigan State a few years ago. They took us to overtime a few years ago. They're not a bad team to play. I think that's going to be a very interesting matchup from that standpoint, to seeing, hey, they got some dudes who transferred in their fifth year. They're going to play hard. What do we have here? But other than that, I mean, it's nothing to write home about. I will say there is a matchup in Cancun that we can look out for, either Northwestern or Liberty. Northwestern's a Big Ten school. Hadn't been great, but it could be just a good team to play. Liberty usually makes a tournament. They'll probably be another tournament team this year. That'll be an interesting matchup. So I think overall, like in years past, before Bruce came in, we would have died for the schedule. It would have been fun. I think it's something to play for, and I think we're really going to see where we land come into SEC play. And I think we also didn't go into, and again, Burgermaster would know the answer to this. I don't. We would typically probably do a big tournament, whether that's in Brooklyn. I know we're doing that next year, or Atlantis. But we did the Israel trip. I think that had a lot to do with this too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would also add, don't forget about, if you haven't been around college basketball a ton, some of these names can deceive you. Like Bradley has a good history in basketball. Like Liberty, you mentioned, Winthrop is in the tournament quite a bit. So like, I think there's only I believe this is right, only 2 quad 4 games as of right now on our whole schedule all year, the lowest like ranking. So I think there's a lot more thought and strategy that goes into this from a scheduling standpoint than sometimes we as like fans acknowledge. Jackson.
Yeah, I think you can only play in these tournaments every 4 years. This Atlantis tournament we just checked off 2 years ago, or sorry, last year, so we can't play in that one again for the 4 years. I think Maui's coming up in the next year or two, hopefully, because we have Brooklyn next year, which I'm excited about going to. I live in Brooklyn, so I'm excited. I think Ben too, probably excited for that tournament, even though it's around Thanksgiving usually, which is tough because I like to visit family. But hopefully we'll see Maui, or maybe that Orlando tournament. It feels like there's no way we're going to do 3 years in a row without a big tournament. So hopefully listen out for the news in the next like couple months. I think this is about the time people announce that, like year or two from now.
So Maui doesn't, they pick SEC teams year by year, and it probably won't be another 8 years or so until we go back to Maui. So you'll see, like, they only pick one team from each conference. So because we went in 2019, it probably won't be till 2029, 2030 before we even go back. Because this year, I believe it's Tennessee maybe going, or Arkansas. No, Alabama. Sorry, it's Alabama. And so it just keeps going by team. So, but even at least we're on their radar. So it's something.
And just real quick, before I invite too much slander to the podcast, I have to apologize to the great citizens of West Virginia. I did not do my homework on them. As a basketball program, they have 29 NCAA tournament appearances and 2 Final Fours. Most recently, they went to the Final Fours in 2010. So,
yeah, I was about to say, Ben, you're talking about Press Virginia here.
Hall of
Yeah,
Fame
this
coach.
is Bobby Huggins. And honestly, they were not great last year. They have been great the past couple of years. I don't know if he's on his way out soon. I don't know if they're getting kind of tired of this wearing a jumpsuit on the sideline and just being kind of grumpy. But recently in the early 2010s, they were pretty good.
Yeah, you had mentioned earlier, Matt, that not a lot of teams make that tournament appearance 4 years in a row. West Virginia has done it twice this millennium, 2008 through 2011, all the way through 2012. So that's 5 years in a row they made the dance. And then 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018.
Well, yeah, no, they've got a great history, and Bob Huggins will be in the Hall of Fame. He's a legend in the sport, kind of like playing Jim Boeheim last year for Syracuse. So, well, we've got a lot to get to, so I'm gonna push us along towards SEC play. Again, we're not going to do a deep breakdown, but just to give everybody an idea of how this conference is setting up for Auburn with the schedule. So we've mentioned Kentucky, Arkansas, and Tennessee are the teams picked ahead of Auburn preseason. So just keep that in mind. So there's 5 teams you play. Let me get to it. 5 teams we play twice. That's always the key. Every year we play Alabama, Georgia, and Ole Miss twice. So that is still the case. That works out pretty well for us. Georgia's been weak for a while. Ole Miss is kind of snuck up on us, but I'll take it. And then Alabama obviously swept them last year. Hope to do the same again. The other 2 we draw are Texas A&M and Tennessee. Tennessee is going to be good. We get a chance to redeem that. We finally lost that winning streak last year. Play them both home and away, both on Saturdays. And then A&M will be an interesting one to track. We'll get into them as we get closer to SEC play. So those are the 5 teams: Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Tennessee. Here's the 4 teams Auburn plays once, but plays at home. Okay, so you don't have to travel to these places: Florida, Arkansas, Missouri, and Mississippi State. And then here's the 4 teams that Auburn has to travel to, but will not host. So the 4 places we do have to go: LSU, South Carolina, Vandy, and Kentucky. So my thoughts on that, and I'll open it up. But overall, pretty good. Not quite as good as last year in terms of advantages built in for Auburn. You kind of have tough ones. Rupp is incredibly tough for us historically, but other than that, don't mind probably going to LSU, South Carolina, and Vandy for your road trips. I like that we don't draw Arkansas twice this year. I like that we don't draw Kentucky twice this year. And I really feel like, without getting too into the specifics, we play Arkansas at home early, and that might be advantageous to host them on the first big Saturday home game in Auburn. That would be a huge swing game for the defending SEC champs to potentially get, and kind of send a little bit of a shot across the conference that, hey, Auburn's going to be in this thing. So that's my general thoughts. Any thoughts on how we drew this year?
I'm hoping we'll do an SEC preview again like we did last year. So hopefully we can keep this short so we can get to the rest of it. I know we've already kind of dragged about the data conference stuff. I think if we could each pick the game we are most excited for, that will kind of tell the tale a little bit for this season. The game I'm most excited for is that early Arkansas game at home. You know how we are at home. It's a big deal. They showed out when we went to their stadium. They had the tents out. They were chanting at us. They were chanting our teams coming off the bus. That was like their statement game, and I just absolutely hate that we gave it to them. We were so close at the end there to not giving that to them. We were number 1, I believe, at the time. And I think part of their hype that they have coming into the season is a lot based on that game. If you lose that game, sure, they have great recruiting, but they just didn't have that like signature game necessarily. Maybe they beat somebody else I'm forgetting about, but that was their big moment where they were like, they were talking about the 90s are back. They are their heads are humongous right now. So I don't know what their out of conference schedule is like or what teams they play before us in that third SEC game, but I would absolutely love to return the favor in the jungle. I think our fans are going to remember that dunk at the end on Wendell that people were pissed about, the storming of the court. I think their coach took his shirt off with his arm. Like I want that kind of atmosphere when they come to us and to see us take them down. And it's a good chance. They could be a great team, but you come in the jungle, we could even be struggling. But if you come in the jungle with the right atmosphere early in the season like that, the way we boomed LSU in that first game, I want to boom Arkansas. I'll take any kind of win, but I would love to boom Arkansas. So that's the one I'm most excited for. Ben, excited?
I'm excited for us to go to Nashville and play Vanderbilt. Um, Jerry Stackhouse is putting together a really good program up there. And just like you talked about with the Arkansas game last year, if Vanderbilt, even if they're having a down year, that's going to be a game that, because of who Auburn is as a basketball program, they're going to think they can win. They're going to think they can make their season with a fantastic home game and upset Auburn as a slightly higher ranked team. And that was the game last year that was really one of Jabari Smith's coming out parties. I mean, he just shot the lights out. He dropped 31 points on him. You could just tell that that team couldn't guard him. And once again, we'll be pretty deep in our season by the time we go up against Vanderbilt. So it will be time for whoever is our star to have a real showing out party, particularly on the road. So I think that could be a really exciting game for us.
I agree with everything Jackson said. I want them here so bad.
All right, I've been outvoted 3-1.
Yeah, they've got a pretty good they've got a pretty good out of conference schedule. They are playing the Maui Invitational, so they got Texas, Maui, and Oklahoma. So we'll know a little bit about Arkansas before that game. They have 2 SEC games before they come to Auburn, so they could be very, very good, and that could be a game day type game. I think everybody's got the feeling of last year's game in their mouth, so I think it's going to be intense.
Yeah, that's the obvious choice looking down for sure. Shout out Greater Nashville Auburn Club. If you are within driving distance of coming to Nashville for that, I think it's February 18th. There's going to be a Friday night get together. There's going to be a watch party. There's tickets there. We've already bought up tickets kind of as a city Auburn fan. So like that's going to be a great there's going to be a ton of Auburn people at that game. So I just want to give a shout out to that. My pick would be, there's a team I hate, guys, really hate a lot. And it's the school across the state. Sweeping them last year, in addition to all the other things, was huge. We've had opportunities to do that previously and not done it. So to me, being able to, it's just huge. It's huge for the state. The whole state of Alabama is getting better at basketball. Alabama's picked 5th, by the way, right behind us. That one means a lot. It means a lot, obviously, to Auburn fans, but I think, the more we can keep them on our tails, kind of like Jackson was saying earlier, I really feel like both those games, home and away. Home, it's finally on a Saturday. It's been a while since we've played them at home on a Saturday. So I'm excited about those. Let's get into the team. And this is where it'll get fun. So, Jackson, did you want to start with our starting 5 question? Is that what you want to start with?
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting way to get this conversation going. If we can look at the roster or 2 deep or whatever, and each go around with each position and say who we think will be starting on the last game of the year. I know there's like a little more politicking and things at the beginning of the season of, oh, well, this guy's been around longer, blah, blah, blah. I want to know who you think are going to be the starters at the end of the season. So if Matt, maybe if you'll lead the discussion on like each one, we'll go around the circle and say who we think they are, and it'll be really interesting to see if we disagree. I think the 3 position will be super interesting. The 4 position will be interesting. So let's see if we can get here.
At the end of the year, I'm going to say, oh man, Wendell, KD.
Let's go one at a time. Let's do point guard real quick. If we go around the circle in the same way, Matt, me, Ben, Ryan.
Wendell Green Jr. by a mile.
Yeah, I agree. Wendell's going to be the guy. I know Zepp and Wendell went back and forth last year. I think, and we've all heard my opinions on Wendell, and we can get into it a little more later if we want to. I think there'll be a list of things we can talk about. But I think Wendell hopefully will have calmed down a bit. We will have hopefully did some X's and O's around his size. I think people will figure out they could trap him and kind of get him frazzled a bit, and he would look at the goal instead of passing the ball. So I think I have to believe, honestly, because we're kind of building around Wendell, and we'll talk about that. So I have to believe that Wendell's the starter and if something went wrong if Wendell is not the starter at the end.
No, I think Wendell's going to start against George Mason, and I think against Tennessee at the end, we're going to be seeing Trey Donaldson take that over.
Whoa, really? That is a hot take.
No way.
A lot of people don't think Trey is like even ready to play at all, and you think he's going to start. All right, listen. If Ben,
I think by the end of the year, yeah.
If Ben is right, we're gonna quote that thing out. We're gonna call him Nostradamus. This guy is gonna be like, he's gonna take over the podcast if he gets that right. I'm gonna buy him a ticket or something. Ryan, any thoughts about that?
That is the hottest of hot right now. I mean, Trey would be lucky to see the court for maybe 20 minutes this whole year.
Well, we've said our points.
Look, I will say, there would have to be an injury of some sort, and this is my personal opinion. There had to be an injury of some sort, and something had to go terribly wrong, because Zepp would automatically take over as that one starter if Wendell's not the one. I just think Trey is a year or two away from being that number one guy. He plays extremely hard. I think there's a couple of decision making things that we saw in Israel, and the speed of the game has a year for him to catch up. But look, we've been wrong about some crazy things before, but
well, here's my question, Ryan, and I'll ask you this. So it seems like they are like, from everything I've heard and read, they are like Zepp is a 2/3 in this offense. Like he is now. So with Chance potentially, easing back in after this operation, like, is it possible Trey gets the 5 or 10 minutes behind Wendell there, or do you think they're going to move Zepp over?
It's fascinating. I don't know. I mean, I think as the season goes on, you may see Chance be that one, because we saw a little bit of that in Israel. But look, from what people have said around here and what people have said that go watch practices, like, Trey is a winner. He wins. He wins at every competition he does. He does not like to lose. He practices every play like it's his last. He may find himself working his way into getting rewarded for a few minutes at the one, but I don't think it's going to be significant.
Yeah, I think the most shocking thing with the Trey thing is that I think Trey would be the fourth string at the point guard position. It'll be Wendell, then Zepp, then Chance, maybe Chance even above Zepp, because we saw it in Israel and it was actually really impressive. I don't think any of us thought that Chance was going to be a point guard coming into when he got recruited, and then we saw him in Israel and he just looked so smooth, and it was great to have a taller guy out there for a little bit. And I think we'll have a conversation at the 3 position, because I think he might go back and forth between the 3 and the point guard at times, just to give that big switch up from a short point guard and Wendell that may be the leader or whatever, to having Chance come in when they're really starting to trap them and think that they've got Wendell figured out. So, and I probably should have said this immediately. Ben, defend yourself. If you have like a really great point on Trey, go ahead and tell us, because we're talking all over you, but it's you that has the opinions. I want to hear.
No, this is great. Listen, I wanted to come in with some hot takes. We need a little bit of flavor here. We need some disagreement. So here's a couple things that people may not know about Trey Donaldson. Number one, he's 6'2". So right out of the gate, he's going to bring you size that Wendell Green just does not have. And down the stretch, the number one thing that hurt our offense and our offensive production were people's ability to trap Wendell Green and his lack of vision around the court. Trey Donaldson was a high school quarterback and defensive back down in Seminole County, and was coached by none other than Heisman Trophy winner Charlie Ward. Now, football, basketball, 2 extremely different sports. We don't normally talk about the F word. But when you talk about the skills that you need to play those 2 positions, it's not just about playing hard and about playing athleticism. It's about having vision and anticipation. And that was one of the amazing skills that Jared Harper has that I don't think we've really ever seen from Wendell Green, particularly once people figured out how to prevent him from getting into his pick and roll, which is obviously where he was at his most dangerous. They started leaving him open towards the end of the year to take some of those crazy long Wendell threes. And I think we have kind of seen the ceiling on what Wendell Green Jr. is going to be. I would love nothing more than to be wrong. But I think that we kind of know what we have in Wendell Green Jr. And I think he's a fantastic changeup to bring in a smaller guard that's going to move faster, that's going to wear down guys that have been playing and have been used to playing a taller starting guard. But I don't think he gives you the kind of floor general that you need. And I think that as the year goes on, I think that internal clock is going to speed up for Trey. And I think by the end of the year, we're going to see him playing a lot of minutes at 1.
But he has to play in order to get that internal clock to speed up. And I just don't know if he will. I don't know if he will.
Screw it. Let's talk about it. It's on our list to talk about. It's my number one point about this team, honestly. I think it's going to hold us back is Wendell Green at point guard. Love Wendell. He's a baller. The dude goes out and scores. He's super fun to watch. Personality is great. The long 3-pointers are a lot of fun. But the point guard needs to make the rest of the team better. And I don't think Wendell does that. Jared made people better around him, it felt like. Wendell is very good, and he's a scorer. He's a lot of fun to watch, but I don't feel like he's making other people better than they already were. And that's the reason why in the offseason, me and Matt had like a 2-hour conversation about how I wanted Yuri Collins recruited and how tough it is to go out and find another guy. And it would have thrown off a lot of chemistry. I'm not saying it would have been easy to try to find another guy, but I think there's a reason you saw Chance at the Israel games play some point guard. I think we know that Wendell is limited at times, and I'm just not sure if he'll ever be athletic enough to make up for his size. And when we play these out of conference teams, when we play the lower SEC teams, he's going to look great. He's going to go out there and score 20 plus. He's going to have some assists. It's going to look like a lot of fun. And then when we go against the Arkansas and the Tennessees and the Kentuckys and the more athletic teams, I think we're going to have some issues. And we're going to have that conversation again. Like, is he limited? And it's going to be a whole thing because it'll be really frustrating to watch him play really well against smaller teams and then be frustrated at the top levels. And it'll come down to who do we expect to win against? And I say we expect to win against the best of the best. And Wendell's just not going to quite get us there. And that's going to be where we see more chance. And Matt is shaking his head, and Ben's got thoughts. And let's go to Matt.
I want to respond after Ben. Go ahead.
Well, what I wanted to do, because I know we're about to lose Ryan here, and I think Ryan, you played two guard for most of your time, right?
Yeah, I played 1 and 2, but
yeah. So let's actually transition then into talking to what's going to allow our point guard to really succeed, and that's the fundamental element that we were missing last year, which is a two guard that can score consistently from mid range and from three. Who do we start there? Because you have a guy like KD Johnson, who is a downhill player. Do we have a guy on this roster that any of you think can step up and be a shooting two guard?
Matt, you want to finish the point guard real quick and then get into that?
Well, no, I think it's a great point. My only responses on Wendell would be Bruce disagrees with you because of the way he's gone about this offseason. No, I mean, seriously, like he's willingly put his eggs in this basket. Now, will that be a bad decision? We'll find out. But there's everything about this offseason has pointed to how the fact that Zepp is working primarily at the wing tells you, to me, it's Wendell. He's confident. He's not worried about that. I think people forget when Auburn last year was at their best, it was not Jabari Smith necessarily stirring the drink and leading the way. It was Wendell. He was coordinating and orchestrating everything happening on the floor when we went to number one. Now, did people adjust to him? Yes. But is Auburn a smart enough coaching staff, and is he a smart enough player to get better in his second year playing at this level? I think absolutely. I think he has not reached the potential of who he can be just because he's short. Jared got so much better from year 1 to year 3 as a point guard in this system. And I think people just need to remember point guard in Bruce's offense is not a pass first position. It never has been, really. It's a volume shooting position. It's a swagger position. It's people had complaints about Jared until halfway through the Final Four year at point guard. So I just think Wendell's going to have to push through some things and adjust to some things. And now he has a new team to play with. My only point is I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, especially if Bruce chose not to bring anybody in, is actually moving people away. I think he loves Chance as an option to be a different kind of point guard, to have the ball in his hands. But I think everything about this offseason shows that this coaching staff's like, we're going to ride with Wendell. So it's going to be the thing of this podcast all year is how that plays out. Because I think it really is the biggest storyline to what this team's ceiling can be.
It's the weak link in the fence, and we'll be watching it all year to see if it's weak or not.
I got two things that I go. Number one, I agree with everything Matt said, that point guards that have been with Bruce for more than 1 year have shown to have exponential growth over the years. I know Jared had 3 years to do that. His growth from year 2 to 3, even from year 1, was incredible. And they had different skill sets, but they're kind of the same. I mean, they really are. And I just think that he has another offseason to work. We saw a little bit of his scoring ability in Israel when we needed a basket, which I think is very important because it's lacking on the wing. I think when we need a basket, who's that go-to guy? We knew who that was going to be last year. We don't know who that's going to be this year. So that's going to be a common theme the first few weeks of the season. And, besides Wendell, there's really nobody else. So it has to be him. Maybe Ben's got Trey, who we need to get him like a fat head behind him, Trey Donaldson, for the rest of the year. I just think it's going to be it's Wendell or die, honestly. I mean, every indication Zepp being a backup one. I don't think he's going to start all year at the one. I think he's going to be our two. I think it'll be Wendell and Zep game one at 1-2. And I think just the way that that Zep plays defense and how they said his spot up shooting has gotten better. And look, we saw when KD came off the bench in Israel and other places, like he kind of comes in a little settled down. Like he's not jacking up shots. He's not trying to make too much happen. I think probably by the end of the year, KD will be starting too. But myself, my friend group, those of us who follow Auburn basketball very closely, wanted a shooter in the offseason. I think that was part of the reason why we fell off towards the end. I think that's the reason why you went in March. We didn't have that, and guard play was exposed exponentially. We have all those guys coming back, besides maybe a freshman and maybe a better headspace Flanagan, but that's it. Maybe Chris Moore can shoot a little better, but we got basically what we got last year. So have they improved? I don't know. That's going to be the question. I think so. I hope so. But Bruce and his staff trust him, so I should trust him. And I should hopefully watch that come to fruition. But that's going to be my major thing all year is when we need a basket, who's that guy going to be? When we need shots to be made, who's going to be that guy? And I think those are going to be two things to watch for those positions.
I think that brings up a good point that Ben brought up and Ryan's bringing it up now, the 3-point shooting from the 2 position and be able to, for the 3 position, to be able to drive through contact and finish. And we just did not have that last year, got burnt by Allen Flanagan super badly. KD was really inconsistent with his 3-point shooting. This year, removing Zep over there. And I love it because we talked about it during the year that Zep was a really quietly good 3-point shooter. He hit those open threes almost every time. And it sounds like that's what they're asking for him to do this year. We'll see if it'll be another classic Bruce player like a Chuma Okeke and Isaac Okoro that's just like, why aren't you shooting that every chance you get? You're the best 3-point shooter. Why are you not shooting that? So hopefully he keeps shooting. KD will be super interesting. It's super interesting to hear who Ryan thinks is going to start this year at the 2. I just automatically was thinking KD. You might be right. It might be Zep, depending on how 3-point shooting's going. We heard out of practice, I believe Bruce said it himself, that the 3-point shooting has not improved the way he was hoping over the offseason. I think we were all hoping that KD, like we saw the amazing in-your-face threes from KD. He had this really weird habit of dribbling into being contested threes and hitting those and then missing the times that he didn't do his little dribble uncontested and like missed the open threes. And then we were putting a ton of pressure on Chance, hopefully, because like Ryan was saying, we were really hoping to get a shooter, didn't really get a shooter. And then we were kind of hoping, all right, well, maybe Chance is the secret shooter guy. And all everybody's saying he is a pretty good shooter. Johan seems to be capable, but it'll be really interesting. I think maybe you're right, Ryan. I think I'm picking that KD will be the start at the end and Zep will be a guy that comes in, hopefully as a sharp shooter for us at times. And maybe he goes around from 1 to 2, but that's what we'll be watching the whole time. And I'm picking KD as the 2.
Yeah. Last thing, this offense this year, like you mentioned, the pick and roll, Wendell with the ball in his hand a lot. I think there may be more opportunities for spot up shooting than there was last year, where the ball may come and stick. So maybe that creating a shot is not as important. We saw a little bit in Israel. Like there were a lot more guys that had some open shots because they got past the first defender and had more options to kick to the corner. There's more spot up shooting opportunities. And I think that's maybe what they're focusing on. And definitely something I'm going to be paying attention to as the beginning of the year starts. But I appreciate the time, guys. Look forward to getting this going, and we'll catch up soon. So thank you all.
Thanks for coming on, Ryan. I think we'll see a lot more Ryan during the season, hopefully. So War Eagle Ryan, thanks for coming on.
See y'all.
Matt, who's your starter at 2 at the end of the year?
Well, I think y'all discussed it in a great way. The thing that we're going to see with this whole roster as we talk about is the flexibility, right? Zep played point guard last year, so he could go back. Chance comes in, and now he looks like a potential 6'6" point guard. Chance, and Bruce has said this, Chance could start 1 through 3 because the 2 and 3 in this offense are basically the same. So Chance you could put in anywhere. And when does he come back 100%? And where is he going to play the most? And so I really don't know. I think they like KD coming off the bench if they can get the best KD out of that situation. But are they really going to, I don't know, are they going to stick with Wendell and Zep and have it flipped this year? That seems a little weird to me. I lean towards KD starting the first game, but I really have no idea. And I think the first few games are going to be really interesting to track lineups and rotations and who's playing where. especially as Chance gets acclimated. Where is he playing? What minutes is he taking? To me, you can't really talk about the 2 without talking about the 3, because this Flanagan Chance Westry thing is going to be fascinating. If Flanagan is Flanagan, the one we want, the one we remember in a long ago dream now, if he's that, well, Chance may start it too. I mean, it's not inconceivable at all. But if you need him, I think that's what Chance is going to be. Wherever the minutes are, he's going to go. If we need him at point guard more because Wendell's struggling, he can go there. If we need him at small forward because Flanagan's struggling, he can go there. If KD and Zep can't make a shot, he can go there. So I think 1 through 3, it's a weird roster where we have all these options, and that's going to be the coaching staff's job to find the best complements to each other and who plays with who best.
Ben, who you say at 3? I think that's by far the most interesting position group there.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of it depends, like you've been talking about, a lot on Chance Westry's health and where he ends up slotting into this offense. But what I would like to see is we only got to see this a couple of times down the stretch, but we actually went to a 3-guard lineup a couple of times. If I remember right, we did it against Missouri and against A&M, where we had Zep and KD on the floor with Wendell running the point.
Yep.
And it left us pretty vulnerable in terms of our defensive rotation, but it forced other teams' defenses to space the floor, because we suddenly had 3 guys who could attack the basket really, really quickly, with just another huge rim protector in there and Dylan Cardwell. So I like the idea that we can adjust those initial 3 kind of swapping positions. We have a bunch of guys that can handle the ball. We have a bunch of guys that can drive. We have a bunch of guys that can post up and shoot. If I remember correctly, it was that A&M game last year where we actually saw Zap come alive and start shooting. And for a little while there, he couldn't miss because he was getting these open mid-range looks. So he would just pull up and sink it. And if we're going to get that Zep Jasper back this year, I want to see him playing some 2-guard. But I think you're right. I think KD is one of the few guys we're returning on this roster that when you talk about we need somebody to go out there and get a basket, who else do you need but Mad Dog KD Johnson to go downhill, put his body in the lane, and get you a tough and one when you need 3 points at the end of the game? I think that kind of leadership and intensity is too valuable. And so I think by the end of the year, we're definitely going to see him starting, because one of the things that really caught us was when we were in a slow start. And KD's the guy that can get your fire going right away. And then the idea that you're going to rotate him out with 6'2" Zep Jasper, 6'6" Chance Westry, now you're really getting into that position we like to be in, where you're bringing in size when other team starters are tired, and you're bringing in guys that can score in different ways. So let's move into talking about our other favorite.
Who's your 3? You said KD and Trey are your people at the end of the year. Who's your 3 at the end of the year?
Honestly, I am hoping it's Johan. I want him
That's
to emerge. Yeah. I want him to emerge as a small forward scoring threat. I think he's got the similar build to Jabari. Judging by his AAU performance, he's a guy that can go out there and actually drop 15 to 20 points a night consistently. So I want to see him be in part of that early scoring rotation. And I would like to see Jalen Williams spending more time at the 4 position, or possibly, playing center in a death lineup for us.
I love that Ben said that, because I was immediately thinking about the first 3 as these interchangeable parts. Well, guess what? What if Flanagan isn't good? And what if Chance is held back for whatever, or we need him at point guard or whatever? Well, what's another cool option you have, Bruce? You have a 4th-year senior in Jalen Williams who could cross-train and play some 3. You could try to mold Johan into that a little bit. He can shoot. He would be a matchup nightmare in a way, out on the perimeter a little more. I mean, and then we're not even getting to the 5 too. Like, up and down this roster, I think the versatility and the options are, and part of this is having 13 scholarship players too. We have a full roster, I think, for the first time ever in a long time, where we have every scholarship filled. There's just so many options on this roster, and I'm glad Ben said that. I mean, it's possible. It sounds kind of crazy, but I really think that you may see that, especially early in the year when we're experimenting. It could happen.
It'll be super interesting. It'll be super interesting to see how much we move around with these starting lineups, because Matt's had this great point for the whole last season and for previous seasons. Bruce does not like to play around with the starting lineup once it's started. He does not like to kill the confidence or anything. So, this will be the year he has got to break that. And maybe even hopefully he's already talking about that with his players, be like, hey guys, usually, I like to play my starters and my leaders. This year, the out of conference is going to be you guys deciding who's going to play in the SEC. It'll be hopefully super interesting to watch the out of conference doing that. I'm picking Wendell, KD, and Chance to start at the end of the season because I think throughout the season, we're still going to be having issues with our 3-point shooting. And we're still going to be having issues scoring and having a guy that can drive the ball and get the ball down there through contact and score. And I think at the end of the year, we're going to realize after playing around with the roster a bunch that we have that if we're going to have a decent offense, we have to have everyone in there that can score. And so that's my theory on these. And I think Ben's super interesting. Hopefully we play enough around with the roster to get to the point where we see if that's usable. Hopefully it's not in a desperation, like halfway through the SEC. Hopefully we're playing around this early. So I don't know if we want to get into 4. Yeah, clearly you're already getting to 4, Ben. So you can go ahead and give your Jalen point because I have points on Jalen too. But I'm not picking Jalen as starter at 4. So.
Oh, okay, interesting. All right. Well, I think Jalen is going to be your starter. I don't know, depending on the way that Bruce ends up wanting to rotate these guys, if he's going to be the one that fills out the year there. I think Johan is a little bit more of a natural fit, just because of his size and his ability to shoot from that mid range, which is really kind of what we ask our 4s to do. But you have 2 guys that you could potentially rotate out. Also, Dylan, I think, might be an interesting choice there too. He doesn't quite have the shooting, but he gives you just such insane length that you put Dylan out there at the 4, and if Johan rotates down to your 3, and then you've got Janai Broom playing your center, how do you move in the lane around that?
Or flip that because Broom's got a little more of a mid-range shot. Maybe Broom plays some 4 and Cardwell because everybody's raving about Cardwell. And again, it's just this theme of like, I think Jackson's right. Like, if I really feel like you're going to see kind of a free for all the first few weeks with a lot of different lineups, unless the coaches may have figured some of this out in preseason that we just haven't heard about. Maybe that's why they're locking down some of the practices. Maybe they're figuring out some of that, but. Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, yeah, you're right. One of those 5s could slide down and you could go big. I mean, who could go bigger than that in the SEC to have like a Johan or a Jalen at the 3 and then, 2 centers basically out there. So, yeah, very interesting.
I think we might see that it's possible, but I really think we're going to struggle still with shooting. And we're going to end up at the end of the year trying to put as many guys that can make shots in there. And when you look at a roster with Johan.
Well, look, Jackson, do you think Johan can shoot?
I think he can shoot fine. I think you're going to end up having it's like Johan or Chance. I'm putting Chance. I'm putting both. I'm putting Chance and Johan and taking Jalen out. I'm not going to lie. We can get to Jalen whatever.
I think Jalen can shoot too.
He can shoot, but he also can't seem to dribble drive. He can't seem to do anything through contact. He doesn't seem to be one to be the rebounder he needs to be. He needs to be down low, and he's hovering at the 3-point line at the 4 position.
Okay, what did Jabari do last year?
Jabari was one of the best shoes we ever had, so of course he can do that. Jalen just isn't. He needs to be able to do both, and he's not doing both.
So what killed us last year, particularly down the stretch, wasn't necessarily the shooting per se. We got into situations where we had nights where Jabari would go 2 of 11, and he just couldn't quite hit, and Wendell would go 0 for 4 from the 3-point line, and KD would start jacking up 3s at the end, and he'd finish the night 0 for 3, and we'd think, oh, if we only had some shooters. But Bruce's offense doesn't work outside in. Bruce's offense works inside out, and every time we got in trouble down the stretch at the end of the year, we either couldn't drive and score, or we had Walker Kessler missing near the basket. That was what our toxic formula was against A&M in the tournament and against Miami in the Big Dance. Both times we struggled to score within 2 feet of the basket. And when we can't do that, you're going to leave guys out there to hack up those long 3s because everybody's suddenly feeling the pressure. Everybody's feeling the pressure to go and find a bucket, and they just can't buy one. So I think one of the things that Bruce realized is that if we can continue to load ourselves up inside and get guys that will bang around and can make short contested baskets, then you're forcing other teams to defend the whole floor. And that gives everybody more confidence. That gives KD the willingness to shoot a 3-pointer in somebody's face. That lets Wendell come down the floor and yak up a 3.
Well, and I would add, I think that's a great point. Everybody is going to fall in love with Janai Broom's post-up game because we have not had a player that you could just throw the ball into who's a grown man, who's been in college basketball for 4 or 5 years now, who can just make a 12-foot hook shot mid-range or step back. Like, if you've watched him at all, he's a great shot blocker. He's going to be a very experienced, good rebounder. He can anchor us inside. And I just think having that as another option, like Ben said, like we're going to have some different options this year that we didn't have, and that could be Chance Westry's agility and athleticism and ability to go both inside and outside. That could be Johan developing into the kind of NBA talent that he could be. So yes, the shooting is going to need to improve. Here's what I think the coaching staff is banking on. I'm going to list off all these guys, okay, that we've talked about that are options outside the one. KD, Zepp, Flanagan, Westry, Jalen Williams. If 2 or 3 of those guys are more in rhythm and hitting open threes, we're not going to be nearly as concerned about that. I think the question is, is Zepp going to be a knockdown shooter and be able to hit those open shots? I hope so. KD's a good 3-point shooter. He actually struggled a little more, I think, last year than I think he will this season. I'm a believer in Jalen's outside shot. So, I think the staff is banking on a couple guys taking that next step for the extra shooting volume that they're going to get and make the most of it. That's what I think. Everybody was 30%, Jackson.
I just
So
say
one of the other things to remember.
I put in the chat that KD is below 30% from 3 because people say he's a good 3-point shooter, and I think he's fine. I think if you're gonna say you're a good 3-point shooter, you got to shoot above 33%, and he's shooting below 30%.
All right. Yes. And let me and that. So one of the amazing things about last year's team was probably until that Miami game, which got away from us a little bit at the end when you could kind of tell everybody was, they saw the writing on the wall. We were in every single game we played. And the difference between whether or not it was a close game that we barely won or a close game that we barely lost was that 2 and 3 position. If we can get 10 to 12 points out of whoever we have in that spot, we're suddenly running away with games. We were winning by 12. We were winning by 15. So I think you're talking about what this coaching staff is banking on. They are just trying to find a formula that's going to get us between 10 and 15 points out of that 2-3 rotation. And when we do that, everything else clicks so much better. You force teams to defend the whole floor so people aren't having to fight through double teams, or teams are a little bit more reluctant to play that strong help defense that we saw them do down the stretch where they were doing a lot of trapping. So I think that's the key to any Bruce Pearl team. Can we get not crazy production? We don't need somebody that's going to drop 20 points a night from the 2-yard. You don't need a Steph Curry that's going to drop 30 points a night and hit 5 3-pointers. You just need production out of that position.
Are we going to get production out of Allen Flanagan? Go.
And Matt,
you want to take this one?
That's a huge question. I think even the most ardent Allen supporters at this point, I know there's still people who are just banging the drum that, and I hope so. I think if you're looking at options to make this team an SEC title contender, it's Wendell Green being a great point guard and taking a leap now that this is kind of his team. I think it's Flanagan with his potential, and it's the 3 newcomers being as good as we think they can be. I mean, so Flanagan's that big, uncertain thing. Obviously, his pro career is going to be impacted a lot by what happens this year. I think if you're real concerned, is he going to force it? Is he going to be looking for his numbers? How does the staff handle that with his dad on staff and him being a 4-year player? There's just a lot of uncertainty around it. His athleticism, when he tested the NBA waters, is off the charts. I think he's fully 100% back healthy, which is great. The question is, can we get that double-digit points, efficient, attacking the rim, being that physical guard that Jackson just so desperately wants us to have? Can he be that? And if he can, well, I think that changes a lot. Can he be a good 33% 3-point shooter? I think he can. He was 2 years ago. So can he do that consistently? And I don't know if anybody should feel super confident in a take on that, though.
Matt, I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit because I think one of the things that we got all season long from Allen Flanagan last year was defensive effort.
Yep.
You could tell, particularly when he was frustrated on the offensive end, he took that out defensively and he made some guys feel it. So if we get that guy back defensively, that's a big deal. But I don't think we need double-digit points from Allen Flanagan. I think we need 6 to 8. And more importantly, because he's so good at drawing contact and absorbing it, we need him to hit his free throws. That was a killer for us down the stretch, was that, in the Alabama game, he was huge. He came up and hit 4 clutch free throws at the end of that game and all but won it for us. And then down the stretch, it was a consistent thing. He went to the stripe and suddenly we were all holding our breath because we didn't know, is he going to be a guy that can make his free throws? And that comes down to a lot of what you were talking about, focus, intensity, and keeping up with your practice throughout the year. Are you a guy that is going to make sure that every time you go to the stripe, you become automatic? Because he's going to get there 4 or 5 times a game if he plays. And that's going to be where he gets his points.
That's the key. And I agree with you. I don't think he looked 100% or confident in his offensive abilities at any point last year. And I think that stemmed from a lack of explosiveness of being able to get to the rim and finish, and the confidence to take those fouls and then take the free throws when you start missing them. I think all that was kind of connected, I hope, for him. Because you're right. He battled his tail off last year on defense and did what he could, I think. It just was very alarming to see the shell of himself offensively on fast breaks. It looked weird. He just didn't look like the same guy. And I know some people saw some stuff in Israel that really eased their minds. I didn't see it. You're right, though. If he's a 6-point scorer a game, he's not going to play more than 15 or 20 minutes a game this year. And that's like a different path where a Westry is starting, or they move one of the fours up or whatever. So I think that's the big question that hopefully the coaches have a good idea if they think he's going to be that guy, because I think that reframes all these positions that we've been talking about.
I think we're a fan podcast, so we could talk about this kind of stuff. The mental aspect of like the narrative that he has in his own head and the narrative we have for him. He came in as like a low 4-star, high 3-star, something like that. The coach's son. Freshman year, we got a lot of contribution from him that we didn't see coming, and we were very happy. Like, oh wow, look at that! I mean, there was talk, and maybe my own talk, maybe being like, we thought we got to get Jalen Green and all these different Greg Brown, and we're like, can he just not be on scholarship? Can we do this? No, he's a good player. He was a good player his freshman year. He had some decent games, and then the next year was the 2020 year where he had to be a guy that stepped up. And he stepped up for it, and it was great. But you wonder how much of that was because there was so many minutes available and so many shots available. Someone had to shoot them, so he went and got his. How much of that was trash points? How much of that was we're down 20, and so of course you scored 17 or 18, you know?
But it's not those points. It's the way he looked. He looked like a legitimate SEC scorer. He averaged 15 points a game, something like that. It was like he looked the part, I think is my point. And then since that injury, he just hasn't looked like himself.
And against Gonzaga, he was the only guy out there that looked like he could do anything. Everybody else looked intimidated. He was out there really doing well. Like he actually fit in as a D1 basketball player against them, against a really good Gonzaga team. But then
which
so
comes
happened,
back to
so
what Matt talking about with those measurables.
Yeah, he was a leader, and he was the kind of guy I was so excited last year to get him back. Even with the injury, I thought that was the missing piece. I thought was a guy that could dribble, drive, and go through contact and either get the foul when we needed those tough points, not the 3-pointer, not the KD like frantically throwing something up, but a guy that could actually in control, hopefully go and get 2 points when things get tough, when the shots aren't going down. He just wasn't there. A big issue that people want to talk about a little bit is that after that surprise season in 2020, he got some NBA draft love. He went through the process. He thought, I mean, it just really feels like he thought this coming season, his third season, his junior was going to be his last season. He was going to come in, be the guy, go to the NBA, and that was going to be it. He comes in, doesn't look quite right. Okay, well, he's getting better. Didn't really get better. He didn't seem to understand how fast he was at this point compared to how much he was. He was taking a lot of charges, taking a lot of weird fouls. The biggest issue is he's supposed to be a leader on this team in his third year, the coach's son. By his senior season, my expectation for him was going to be this like solid SEC guy that people are asking like, he's still around, man. And he's scoring 15, 16 points, maybe helps us win a game here and there, but not a superstar, just a really solid starter. Then last year he took a huge step back with frustrating fouls, bad shots early in shot clocks, like just really bad, like rookie type mistakes that were all very mental. And then you got to Israel, and some people really felt really good about it. Well, he was dominating like high schoolers in the first game. But when he got to that third game, he was back to looking frustrated again and didn't quite understand how fast he was or what passes needed to be made or taking shots that didn't seem like maybe they were in the flow of the game because he had to get his. So a lot of this will be mental. And we can talk about this because we're a fan podcast. He missed a week or two of practice in the last like preseason. He did not need to miss preseason practice. I know we got Israel in, it really helps, but he missed all preseason practice last year, the injury, and a big chunk of the game. If he wants to get better and be the guy on this team, because part of the issue last year too was that Jabari took all these shots away from him last year. He couldn't be the guy when there's other guys on the team that were the guy. So you need to come in and be the guy again and show people in preseason practice you're the guy. You go mysteriously missing. It says the family issue. Probably was. You know, his father was missing too, but I don't know. Me and Matt kind of talked about this, and people thought I was crazy for saying this. I thought he might leave the team in the offseason and go find himself a team where he can be the guy so he can up his draft status. And a lot of this year is going to be a chemistry thing with Bruce being can I get the whole team to buy in that this is a team sport? None of these guys are probably going to be like last year. We had a weird year last year where we had a guy, you're getting that guy the ball. Usually it's not like that with Bruce. This year it's going to be a lot of that. And with all this talk about how we can rotate this guy here and rotate this guy there, you got to hope there's no infighting or anything because no one's going to know what their role is necessarily. It's going to be really tough to figure out whose role is what while we're changing rosters out without hurting egos and things. And Bruce is an amazing expert at that. But if you have a toxic guy that maybe was looking, I don't know what he was doing when he missed the practices, but if you have a guy that's like, I got to make the NBA this year at all costs, it's my senior year, like my number one goal is the NBA, instead of my number one goal is to make this team better. When Ben has the idea of him scoring 68 points, maybe coming off the bench after Chance, or maybe starting at 68 points, it might become an issue that he's looking and saying, I have to do more to make the NBA. And I'm going to be watching that the whole year. What's his attitude look like? And I hope it's great. I hope he wants just the team to win. I'm afraid it's going to be a little more the other way.
Especially early on. Especially what happened to him last year was this team was undefeated or whatever, and they were playing just incredibly, and he started to work his way into that. And we had already played 10 games. I mean, the team was, like you said, the roles were kind of figured out, and he did help us win a couple games, and he did contribute. But you're right. I mean, the non-conference this year is, if you're paying attention to this team and you know these guys, this is going to be the most entertaining and interesting non-conference I think we've had in a while, not necessarily because of the matchups, but man, all those things that you talked about, all these options, all that's going to have to get worked out, and somebody might get hurt and all these things, but that's what's going to make it interesting to watch. You're right. I have legitimate fears too about Flanagan. Go ahead.
But we have 4 guys on this roster that have been on championship caliber teams a couple of times and have been through some stuff together. You got Katie Johnson, you got Zep Jasper, you got Wendell Green, you got the most important guy, I think, on this entire team in terms of leadership. You got Jalen Williams. You got a guy that at the end of last year, Bruce Pearl said, we got a guy on this roster that we can build a team around. Because you saw somebody like Jalen Williams, who had been an afterthought for much of the year, that when he saw a time and when he saw a chance, he got in there, he did the hard work, he got in the post, he scored when it was dirty and when it was hard. And so I think we have some real young talent, but I think we've also got some wily old veterans that know what it can look like when a season goes off the rails, and can also know what it looks like to be the number one team in the nation and to have everybody coming for your neck. So I think in terms of our future, I think it's brighter than it's ever been. I think we have the right combination of young studs and old wily veterans that have run the gamut, that are here to win basketball games and are here to hang banners.
Don't underestimate the value of having guys like Ben just say, there's a ton of guys who have been in this program, and they know that it's about not counting your success. It's the team's success, not your success. When the team's doing better, everybody's doing better. Everybody's draft stock goes up. That selflessness, that's the key. And but I think we have the right to question, can he do that with this group that's such a unique? I personally look at Jalen. Janai Broome is just going to be I'm going to say grown man all year. He's just an adult. He is going to come in and take this opportunity to play in the SEC. I think he is poised to just be really good. I think he's better than people realize. But you're right. And hopefully having those experienced voices in that locker room will keep things moving the way they need to go, even if one or two guys go sideways. That's what you have to do.
You worry about an alpha wolf that's not the alpha on the team, a guy that wants to be the leader on the team, that wants to lead that team, but just can't do it on the court. And if that becomes kind of like a weird issue. So that's what I'm worried about with Alan Flanagan. I'd be worried that at some point, if he just can't do it on the court, but keeps talking and acting like he's the guy that's going to do it, give me the ball, I got this, when he's like the third or fourth or fifth option, it becomes an issue because he's saying to himself, I need the ball at the end to get this score, to do a thing. And maybe he doesn't need that. So I hope he buys in. Bruce is the master, getting people to buy in. And for me to finish off this starting lineup thing, I think we heard the Ben has Jalen at the 4. I'm going to have Johan at the 4, Chance at the 3. I really think it's going to be about scoring, and we're going to have issues with scoring this year. And we're going to be maximizing that lineup. And Matt mentioned Jonai Broome, so I think we can get to that too. That's going to be my 5 also. I know we all love All Dillon, but he's just not. Every year he's gotten better, and I'm so proud of him. But I still think it's going to be about the offense. And Jonai's got that offense, and he's got the blocks. And I think we're going to be in for a block party again this year. We got to get the signs. We got to get the branding down. Block party.
So we're not buying because all the hype from national writer, everybody who comes in and visits Auburn comes out and says, you know, who's really good? Dylan Cardwell. And
it's really good we're surprised he's that good, but not Jonai Broome yet.
I mean, I think Jonai Broome is going to start, but I think it's going to be a very 50-50 thing. Like I do not anticipate Kessler played like 28 or 30 minutes a game last year. I think it's going to be much closer, not just because Broome isn't as good. I just think Cardwell is going to force his way on the floor with how much he's developed and how much we gush about all the good things about Dylan Cardwell when he's on the floor. You start pairing that with a little more offensive ability and a little more experience, a little more size. We're in good shape. I think we all agree, like the front court after losing Jabari and Walker, I don't know how we
two consensus All-Americans.
I don't know how we could be in a better position a year later with the guys we have at the 4 and the 5 and the 3 and the flex. Like, I just think we have a lot of weapons over there.
Ben's about to pick Stretch as the 5. I'm feeling it.
Hey, we love having 3 centers on this podcast. Foul trouble, injuries.
Oh, yeah.
We love having 3 of them. Stretch. God bless you for still being here and rocking the orange and blue. I love it.
And also just remember, too, that like a lot of times when we had Dylan rotate in last year, he was kind of expected to hold the line. You want him to be the cleanup guy. You want him to be the help defender. If we run this offense through Jonai Broome, which we very well could, if we get Wendell back into that pick and roll, if we get Westry or one of these other guys that can turn us into Lob City and we can get that ISO play inside, there's no reason why as soon as he comes off the floor, here comes 6'11", do it all Dylan Cardwell. He's going to block your shots, and then he's going to turn around and he's going to hit a jumper in your face. We want to see it, Dylan. Here's
a question for you guys. Can we get Jonai Broome the ball when he's posted up down there? And if we actually can get him the ball down there, does that impact our offense? I think we saw with Austin Wiley, we even saw it with Walker Kessler. We had a lot of trouble with our small guards getting the ball down there when they're posted up. And then at times, if we called the play, I mean, especially with Austin Wiley, it slowed everything down. It took 10 seconds just to get the ball down to him. And then if he didn't score, it was basically like a turnover because we took so long to get down there. We're not even getting a second shot back up or anything. So I'm curious to you guys if you think we're adjusting to be able to get Jonai Broome the ball. I don't know. I got frustrated with that. So
Matt knows what I'm going to say.
Well, it's a valid question because it's a dying art in basketball in general. Throwing a good entry pass, it's like I sound like an old man. It's true. Not many schools are great at it, but you don't have many good post players either. I mean, personally, I'm going on record. He'll be the best post player in the last decade that Auburn's had as an offensive skill set. So we better be able to get him the ball, and we need to do it within the flow of the offense, going up tempo, moving up, getting in the front court quickly and getting that early touches for him. So we're not waiting till 5 seconds on the shot clock. I would just assume with the staff we have that we have to be working on that. It's not necessarily going to be our lead. It's not our offense necessarily, but man, we've talked, sometimes Bruce's offense gets very stagnant, right? We've seen that. It's not always the cleanest, prettiest X's and O's offense. Having a guy you can just throw the ball into, like you're worried about Wendell just jacking up shots. Well, it helps having a guy you can throw the ball into, not just a post-up game, but he can turn and hit a mid-range shot in your face. He has good touch. I don't think it quite stretches out to 3, but it's close. He can shoot the ball. And I think he's been there. He's done that. He's played a lot of basketball. I think the sky's the limit, and we better be willing to utilize it at least some.
So you'll recall that I pointed out several times towards the end of the year last year that K.D. Johnson was our best guard at getting the bigs the ball. Mm-hmm. One of the things that he was so able to do with his drives is disrupt the lane, draw help defense away, and then dish it to one of the big guys. So the idea that we're moving Zap to the 2-guard spot, I think we're going to see even more of that out of our 2s. What they're going to meant to do is break down the defense, draw help away from all of our giants, and then we're going to see a lot more of those dishes. I think if we could get Wendell into the pick and roll, people kind of have a sense of how to stop that. So if we see a Chance Westry, a 6'6" guy, coming down and playing some point with Jonai on the other side, that's a lot harder to trap. And even if you do, he's as tall or taller than a lot of the guys defending him, so he's still going to be able to see the floor in that way. And I think the advantage of a guy like Johan or Jalen or even Dylan, if we try to do it, if we move him in to play some stretch four, now you have a guy that can inbound in your half court in a way that you actually really, really need. And that was one thing that I wish we had done a little bit more last year. I don't think Flanagan quite had the passing skills to get it where we needed to be, but I think Jalen can, and I think we'll see probably more of him inbounding this year.
Who's going to be, so this is not on our next list here, but I think it's interesting. We know Janai Broom or Cardwell will be the center that's dunking the ball on these alley-oops from Wendell, kind of like Walker Kessler did last year. Who's going to make up for that Anthony McLemore and that Cambridge dunk coming in from the wing? Who's going to be that guy? Is it Jalen? Is it Johan? Is it Chance? Who's that guy that can be the dunk on like a fast break?
Oh, if you're talking about, well, two different things. In the half court, that would be Flanagan. In an ideal world, that's who that is coming off the weak baseline on some of those plays. So I think him, if Chance is playing there, you might have him. You know, if you actually think back, you didn't see a ton of lobs to like Chuma or Jabari. It's just not really the way. We don't seem to run a lot of that kind of action. Now on the fast break, our bigs, our giants, as Ben said, I think they can all move. They can all run. I really hope we lean into the tempo again. You know, I want us to get out and run. We've got 5 big guys who can play. They're all athletic. Let's push the pace when we can and get some easy baskets. I think that's going to be huge for this team.
I think we'll see it from Johan. I think Johan's that athletic freak, and he's going to be living around the basket with dunks. And I think we'll see that a lot coming in from the kind of cleanup dunks that we saw sometimes from Cambridge, but more consistently can actually dribble the ball and score.
Good point.
You know, there's an athletic freak on this roster that we're not talking about. Leor Berman, ladies and gentlemen. Leor Berman's going to be our guy. When we are
What are your predictions on Leor Berman?
We're breaking out the fast break offense.
We have not talked about Leor Berman yet. We have to he played a lot in that conference last year and hit some threes for us. That St. Louis game, I believe, he hit a really big three. Maybe Chance Westry's. I guess that goes into like the one last thing we have on our list that we haven't talked about is Chance Westry's knee surgery he just had recently. I mean, I'll let Matt talk more about that, but maybe that's Leor's little chance there where he gets 5 to 10 minutes or something like that to start the year. Matt's shaking his head. Leor Berman thoughts and Chance Westry thoughts.
Ben, you got anything?
Oh, you want me to go?
Go ahead if you want.
No. Like, listen, if you're a fan of Leor's game, he's probably the only catch and shoot guy that we have on this roster, and that's just because he doesn't quite have the athleticism in Division I basketball to actually drive it. He doesn't have the size, so he's going to be somebody that knows how to space himself on the floor, set up outside of that arc, and take a shot. So if you're a fan of Leor Berman, if you're a fan of that kind of guard, the early basketball games are going to be the ones to watch. You're going to see him get some minutes. You're going to see him get some looks, and he's not going to be quite as outsized as he will be once we get into SEC play. I hope we wind up in a situation where we're running it up on that team from up the road, and we get to see him come in and drop 100 on somebody. Yeah, I don't think he's going to feature as part of the rotation. If you wanted my surprise guy that's going to feature in any part of our rotation, it's probably Chris Moore. Yeah, I think size-wise, we saw down the stretch that Chris is a guy that could have, I think, prevented some of the defensive liabilities that we saw from our shorter guards. I think a lot of that's going to depend on injury, though. I think we have enough young talent coming in. I will be shocked if we see Chris Moore more than twice in a first half in SEC play the whole year. I think once we get into conference play, Bruce likes to have his guys established and live or die by them because he wants the guys to develop, and the only way that you develop is by getting those reps and being in the actual game.
I agree. I hope we get all 13 scholarship guys at different points in the first few weeks. Just for, I like we've talked about tonight. I think we want to use this time to figure some stuff out. I think Leor's kind of hosed this year with playing time. You just look down kind of the options like KD and Zepp. I mean, those are 2 old experienced guys, you know, at kind of that 2 guard. Flanagan, if he's healthy, he's going to be playing. Trey. So Jackson keeps sending in our chat, how many rotations for these guys?
I think now that we've talked about who we think is the starters, some of these guys, like people love Leor from a fan favorite. And so it's interesting to see Matt say 0 rotations for him. You would think maybe some early on, and then Ben thinks Trey's going to be starting by the end. So you have to see, like, these guys are going to have to do something. Like, there's only so many rotations. Who's going to get rotations? Chris Moore, I could see the two. I see the two in the out of conference, and then maybe fading to one even in conference. But maybe Matt disagrees.
Well,
I think rotations is a good way to measure it.
Yeah, no. So again, if by rotations we mean, in a competitive USC game, okay, I don't think Leor's getting on the floor unless our shooting is just so bad that he's willing to play him over a guy like Chris Moore. Or it would take something like that. Now, do I love having Leor as an option if and when somebody gets hurt, gets in foul trouble, we need a rotation or two per half? Sure, that's fine. But if everybody stays healthy, I just don't see a path for Leor because there's so many guys that we've talked about we can move. So Leor, I don't see. Trey, I think the only way he gets some early is if, Chance isn't good to go and we decide we don't want to play Zep at point guard, which I think could easily happen. I think they may play Trey a little bit if Chance isn't playing
at the point guard position, because I could see him playing maybe like some weird rotation minutes at the 2 or something, just because they don't trust him at the. So you think early on at a conference he'll play a rotation or 2 at point guard?
I think Trey and Wendell could, but I think Trey and Wendell are the only guys that are kind of pigeonholed on this team in terms of position. I do not think Trey's going to play 2.
Who's the point guard that's coming in when Wendell subs out? Who's playing point guard?
Chance.
All right, you heard it here first.
My opinion. Now, if Chance is out, is it Trey or is it Zep? I don't know.
So that's been the main determiner in why I think it's going to wind up being Trey, particularly towards the end of the year. A knee scope is not a major knee surgery. When I had my most recent one, I was back exercising in about 2 weeks. So the odds that we see Chance before we get out of non-conference play are still pretty high.
Okay.
But I think you trust Chance more as a scorer. When he transferred and started playing his high school ball in Arizona, he scored 1,000 points in 2 seasons. Chance is a guy that is a score first player. And so I understand that the point guard is typically a score first position for a Bruce offense. But I think what we have been missing from the point guard position and when we were at our best was when you had a guy like Wendell that was only hitting 3 of 5 shots a game and was a facilitator more than anything else. And so what I anticipate is you have a guy like Trey who, as he spends more time and gets more reps and is around some of these non-conference games where he's challenged, but not challenged to the degree that he will be in conference, that internal clock starts to speed up and we benefit from his decision-making. And you see that he is less of a liability because he's not a score-first point guard.
That could happen. In terms of, I think personally Chance is a little more of a facilitator from what I've seen. And so I listen to what Bruce says. Like, I'm not really like, Bruce just says things on purpose. And that's one of the things I love about him. He came out in the last week or two and started saying like, well, before this Chance thing, like he would have started at one of the positions 1, 2, or 3, like for sure. He was one of our best guards. But he said it in a way where he was like, but that's not going to happen. Like he's not going to be starting at one of those spots on game 1. Like you said, it won't
because of the surgery.
Because of the surgery, which I found a little odd.
Right.
So that I just made a note of that. And then the other thing I've noticed with it's just the way he says certain things. And I think the way he gushed about Chance and the way the types of things he said about him makes me think that that's their plan, is to have him play a lot at the 2 and 3. But I think he's probably their primary option to back up Wendell if in a perfect world. That's just from what he said.
If we play game 1 against George Mason, you think Wendell comes out after that first rotation and Chance comes in, and that's where we see Chance's first playing time?
No, not necessarily. If Chance is healthy, I think he could start at the 3.
Okay.
I think Chance is going to be on the floor a lot. I think people are underselling him a little bit.
Yeah, and I want to remind you too that first game against George Mason, they have size at guard. They have a lot of guys that are over 6'3". Their 2 starters are 6'4" and 6'7", and they do play that 4 out 1 in style of offense. So you can be a little bit more undersized as long as you're disciplined. And I think Wendell is pretty disciplined as a defender. He wasn't a huge liability until we got against those teams that knew how to rotate and switch and put a guy that was 230 plus pounds on him who could just back him down. So Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see who that second point guard is, especially if we're treating Zep more like a two guard, which I don't think is a bad idea. I think Zep is a good scoring option.
The big question to me would be is that will tell us a lot about how Bruce feels about Wendell and Chance, because they know they have Zep, who's a 6th-year player who they can put him back at point guard if they need to, right? And if Wendell got hurt, they might do it just to have the extra option over there and not put all that on Chance or Trey. It's going to be fun, man. All these discussions, like, it's got me excited about all the possibilities. And I just think I don't remember a team that's this versatile in terms of their size and skills, ability. Like, I just want to defend Jalen real quick. I'm about done. We're coming up on 2 hours here. Jackson last year was super Alan Flanagan guy. He has fallen on the opposite side now.
I got burnt.
I'm holding my Jalen stock loosely. I love what he can bring. Johan is clearly an NBA talent, and it's going to be, but Bruce has said, at least he's saying publicly, the 3, the 4, the 5, even the 2, we don't really know who's going to start. There's good competition there. And I think, I hope Jalen is at very minimum, like 20 minutes a game, like kind of playing almost an even rotation with Johan and bringing that shooting, that like some of the different scoring skill sets, like you said, Ben, doing some of that. Like, I think he has so much potential. He was a perfect teammate for Jabari last year. Jalen got hurt more by Jabari than anybody on this team in terms of his role and his stats. I mean, it's just a fact. He only played 9 or 10 minutes a game because Jabari was so good. I hope for Jalen's sake and for my own stock that I have in Jalen Williams that we see, like, again, is Jalen Williams a guy that looks like, shows more consistent signs of that potential that we've seen? If so, that recalibrates how good this team can be. And I think for me, wrapping up, and I'll shut up, is just which 2 or 3 of these guys on this roster are going to, like, outperform what we've seen so far or what your expectations are of them. How many of those guys do that will go a long way to determining what kind of season this team has.
Matt, I had one question. I know we need to wrap it up too, but Matt, one question for you because you love Jalen. What is Jalen's, like, special skill set? What is Jalen going to bring to this team that's like, I'm not as much of a Jalen guy. I think he's a decent player, but, like, what is his one thing that you feel like I could stand by this with Jalen?
Well, I think his thing is that he doesn't have one thing. I think he's a great team basketball player that fits the 4 position in this offense perfectly. Is he Jabari from 3-point range? No. But his shot's better than he is a better shooter than people think and give him credit for, in my opinion. I think last year you did see some development in a little bit more of an inside game. He's a solid rebounder. He's super athletic, which we saw from the first moment he stepped on the court. But he's not a selfish player. He's not going to be a ball stopper. And he's probably never going to have the stats that, some of these other guys. He's not going to have Wendell's stats. He's just not.
What do you want him to do more of this year that he didn't do last year? What is, like, something, shoot more threes, drive the ball more, beat more rebounds, more blocks? What is the thing that he needs to do to step that up to, like, fit your narrative of Jalen?
He's got to hit his open threes, because that 4 position, we've seen it with Chuma, Jabari, Tobias Harris back at Tennessee. You're going to get shots. You're going to get – the offense is kind of built for a good power forward. So the thing I'm going to be watching is Johan and Jalen, who makes the most of those opportunities when they're in the game. So Jalen needs to be more visible. You always talk about, I just don't see him. I don't see him do anything. Well, that's fair at times, that especially last year because he barely played. He needs to make the most of his opportunities on the offensive end, and I think Bruce is going to be on him in his Bruce Pearl style to be like, you are a good player. I believe you can make your threes. I believe you can attack the rim. I believe you can be a better rebounder, a better defender. I think obviously it's a senior year. It's kind of put up or shut up time with this opportunity, but I do feel for him because Johan is a killer, prospect. So
I want him to bring some of that Dylan Cardwell energy. Be attacking, be visible. I want him out there being visible and feeling like a menace because he was so athletic his freshman year, has not looked the same way. I want him coming in on a blindside block. I want him coming in on a blindside alley-oop. I want the ball down there. I want him to run through a man to get that ball into the goal. He's just not. He's kind of afraid of contact a little bit. I'm sorry to keep going on, Jay, because we really do need to wrap up.
No. You need to go back and rewatch that Miami tape, my friend.
Hey, one game's one game. A whole year of him kind of fading towards the 3-point line and not going in there and getting the tough stuff.
You got to keep in mind that's what the offense is. That's what the offense is. He's going to be at the 3-point line. Like he's going now. He needs to make his shots. His whole highlight reel his first 2 years were these incredible plays. Like it's there. It's there. Like we've seen it with Flanagan. Although I think Jalen is going to be the quietest. He is just not a loud person on this team with all these personalities. He is the rock solid professional. I think you're going to have a lot of efficient games from him. That's what I always look for. Is the team better when he's on the floor? In plus minus. Is he turning the ball over? Is he defending well and rebounding well? And then the shots in the offense, I think, will come. I don't expect him to be a breakout NBA G League player next year or anything. I do think he could be a good college player. And if he can be with Johan, I think, and they are both contributing at a high level, and it would really make a difference, I think, for this team.
I'll give you a stat line, Jackson. We need 6 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists out of Jalen Williams a game.
All day.
That seems low to me.
But I'm telling you,
he was doing that last year behind Jabari. So we need Johan to be taking up 3/4 of the minutes and scoring 20 plus.
Yeah, we had him doing that behind Jabari, and we you might recall we had a pretty good year last year.
Matt wants him to be even with Johan. If Johan's scoring 6 points and 4 rebounds, we're screwed. We need Johan to have kind of a breakout. It can't be Jabari.
You're correct.
To be clear, we have to look at this holistically as fans, right? Like what do we need from the power forward position? Bruce was on record saying he thought we had the best power forward team in the country. And a lot of that was Jabari, but it also, I think Bruce thinks really highly of Jalen in all the little things that maybe don't show up as much on the stat sheet. So does he need to be more visible and more of a leader? Kind of like Ben was saying, he's a 4th-year player. He's seen it all. He's been quiet. He's gotten his teeth knocked out. He's had high flying moments when he got in as a freshman. He's worked on a lot of parts of his game. You just root for a guy like that. I hope he has the kind of season. But here's the challenge. All these players we've talked about, there's only one ball. So not everybody gets to overachieve and reach their goals. And that's what Jackson was talking about. How do we keep everybody pulling in the same direction, not getting selfish with it? And we have a great culture for that, which is awesome.
And so to bring it all back, and if you're a fan of basketball and if you're a fan of Auburn basketball, and let's face it, if you're 2 hours into an Auburn basketball podcast, you're probably both of those things. For a lot of years, you probably haven't watched the early games. You haven't watched a lot of the out-of-conference against some of the smaller mid-major teams. Watch this year. This is going to be the time where we really get to watch this team work through some stuff, find their identity. We're going to see some leaders step up. We're going to see some standouts find their roles in this offense. This is going to be a great time to watch Auburn basketball and watch some real quality stuff happen. So turn on your television, buy some tickets, go to Cancun if you can, but don't miss those early games.
That's a great point, Ben, and we'll wrap it up after this. I mean, we could talk all day. We could keep going for 10 more hours. We love Auburn basketball. I'm hoping you guys, I think this year is the most anticipated year. I don't think it's going to be as good as last year. I don't think the talent on the squad is quite the same. Me and Ben knew it was going to be great. Ben disagrees. Maybe Ben thinks it's going to go all the way. But I think the fans anticipate this year more than any other year. And you're going to see it in the out-of-conference game. You're going to see it with the away fans going to places. It's going to be a lot of fun this year. Tune into the podcast. We'll be here after every game. Matt and me for sure. Ben will be here a lot of the times. Hopefully Ryan will be here sometime, maybe some others. We're excited. I hope you guys are excited. We hopefully have a big podcast coming up in a couple of days. So keep us on your feeds, share us on Instagram, whatever, communicate with us. Hopefully this year we can have a little more fan engagement from questions and things. Always feel free to hit us up on Instagram and Twitter. We're super responsive on there. So like and subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Matt, Ben, War Eagle.
31-0, War Eagle, baby.
War Eagle, guys. Let's do this.